And here's two guys that got asked to teach fish how to fish, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 33 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In today's episode, we responsibly plan for life as we know it. We are your hosts, Aaron.
And Jonathan.
You are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. A brief announcement before we begin today. Jonathan and I have been very hard at work on a special project. We will be launching the In the Rabbit Hole membership program in the coming months. Membership will include exclusive content, videos, ebooks, special offers from supporting vendors, and big discounts on In the Rabbit Hole information products. Stay tuned for more details as we approach the launch date. Now, on with the show. Today's show is not just about surviving, it's about living well, which just surviving is kind of pointless. For listeners that have been with us through the previous 32 episodes, hopefully we've gotten across that we don't believe in just focusing on surviving, but instead living a happier, more fulfilled life day to day or in extreme circumstances.
Yeah, I think, it may be a song lyric or something. I don't know where it comes from, but it's that whole idea of surviving isn't surviving at all if you're not living. You got to live each day. And, we want to talk a little bit about how you actually go into that and do that from a process point of view, give you some things to work with on how to live better.
So today's show is going to be playing off Steven Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. For those of you who aren't familiar with the book or have never read it, it's actually a pretty good read. Now, while we do agree and disagree with each other on the topic of some of Mr. Covey's concepts, and we feel that there is quite a bit that can be learned from the processes, the 7 habits that he lays out. With these 7 habits, we've taken them and we've really kind of manipulated them so that they fit in and to help you become more effective in achieving your survival chi enlightenment. So there are, just like with the 7 habits of highly effective people, we're going to do 7 habits that you can implement and 7 concepts that you can implement in your life to improve the effectiveness you have on living a better, happier, more fulfilled life, which is really what Survival Chi is all about.
Right. It's all about living better and being prepared for not just the worst case scenario, but tomorrow. Exactly.
So the first 3 really focus on becoming independent and expanding your independence within your own life. And then 4 through 6 are how do you take that independence and apply it within a community effectively and productively. The 7th is about maintaining and balance, and how do you keep from going nuts with all of this. So let's start with number 1, and we'll eat this elephant one bite at a time.
So let's talk about being proactive. I think everybody has an idea of what that means. We all want to be proactive. But what does that really mean? It means making decisions that allow you to improve and change and influence things outside. So you're not only going to be influenced, you're going to influence other things. You're not going to be reacting to external forces. You're going to be actually impacting those external forces or being ready for them. Aaron put it well earlier. It's not about action. It's about reaction. Reverse that. It's not about reaction, it's about action. And it's action without reaction is the way he put it earlier. Sorry, we're a little tired, and I actually want to just say this right now. Happy birthday to Aaron. It was his birthday yesterday. We're
Thank
recording
you,
this. Yeah, no problem. We're recording the show on Sunday. It was Aaron's birthday on the 3rd. So happy birthday, Aaron. And we had a long night last night, so forgive any pauses or reversals in words that we might have throughout the show. Some of the choices we made last night were not good.
But I think are important to make at least once a year.
Oh, yeah. And we were prepared for them. We knew they were coming. We weren't unprepared for the idea. But going back to the show, it's all about being proactive.
Well, I want to point out one last thing,
okay.
as long as we're talking about these Labor Day festivities, that if you hear snoring in the background, yes, that is the Tactical Weimaraner alert system, who shares the same birthday as I do, and is now 1,000,001 years old. So he
partied last night too.
Yes,
so.
he is snoring rather loudly. We'll do what we can to keep it out of the show, but just in case you hear it, that's what that strange rumbling is in the background.
Right, it's not one of us falling asleep between words.
Well, maybe not. We'll see what happens.
I can't speak yet. We're only a couple minutes in, so.
So being proactive, getting back into the swing of things.
So that whole idea of being proactive, you don't want to allow everything that happens around you to be the guiding factor in your life. So, I mean, let's even use recent events, the hurricanes that happened in the Northeast. People knew those were coming for quite a while. So rather than having to react, like, for instance, Aaron and I'm going to use us as the example here, and if we were up there, I've got 28 gallons of water stored in my house. I don't have to worry. If water goes out, that gives me and my wife 14 days worth of clean water to drink. That's being proactive. You are prepared for an event. You know it could happen. It may not. You know what? It probably won't. But you're prepared for it. You're being proactive. You live in a hurricane corridor, you should be proactive about certain things. That's really along the lines of what we mean by proactive here.
It's taking action without being reactive, so it's proactive. You are, like Jonathan was just saying, you are taking preemptive measures for things that could happen. And going back to Spearco's disaster matrix that we do regularly reference, which is focusing the summit up, since we've done whole conversations on it, but it's focusing on the most likely first, and once you've taken care of those, you move on to greater and greater things that have a higher impact but a lower probability,
which actually leads very nicely into step 2 here, which is goals.
What is the end result? And this is where you start with goals, is, as Covey puts it in his book, start with the end in mind. And Covey starts, I believe, with the extreme end in mind, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And there's quite a few exercises I do when I'm working with goals and trying to figure things out for my life personally that I do think to the very end for my life, where do I want to end up? But sticking more inside the realm of what we're talking about in the context of the show, where I guess one of the things we could ask is, how prepared do you want to become? Do you want to have, we'll go with food. Do you want 2 weeks worth of food? Do you want 2 months worth of food? Do you want 2 years worth of food? So those are goals that need to be set.
Right, and those are small goals. So maybe the goal really is, I want to not go without food. So if that's your goal, that you never want to be in a position in life where you don't have access to food, then in order to get there, you start out with, maybe my initial goal is, I want to have a week's worth of food on hand. And, a year from now, I want to make sure that I have 2 weeks of food on hand. And 6 months from then, I want to have a month of food on hand. So it's setting goals that make sense. And I use a term, and I do this in business all the time. Figure out what you want to do. So if you are a human being, person like all of us listening, I assume, except when we broadcast into space, if you want to be able to run, then you first need to learn to crawl. You then need to learn to walk, and then you'll be able to run. So if you think of everything in terms of crawl, walk, run when you set your goals, set small goals first. Figure out where you want to go, and then set the goals you need in order to achieve that bigger end goal.
Like Jonathan was saying, start with your long-term goals and move back to what are the short steps you need to make it to those long-term goals. Whether it's food storage, water storage, whether it's being prepared in any way for a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, any of the things that can happen in your life.
Or even just improving yourself, actually.
Improving yourself is something that we are going to, this is an important topic of survival chi, because survival chi and the show in general is not about just living through disasters and hard times. It's also about, how do we improve our lives today?
Right.
How
And
do we make things better today?
You know, not to like cut you off or anything, but if you're listening to this show, you've already set some goal for yourself. That initial goal was, I want to learn more about living better or survival or urban survival or preparedness, any of those topics. If you determined you wanted to learn a little bit more about that, and one of the goals was, hey, I need to bring information in, and you're listening to the show. We've got a lot of you out there listening now. First of all, thank you to all the listeners. It's a good birthday gift to Aaron, too.
Yes.
But so we've got a lot of you out there, and you've already achieved, maybe this is the crawl part. Maybe the walk part becomes implementing some of these tools. And then with run, you're not just implementing them and learning, you're actually starting to teach. So it's all about, you start getting these goals in mind and you work your way up through all of them, which really leads us to another topic, or the third item in this list, which is, well, now that I've got these ideas of crawling, walking, and running, there's a lot of things I need to get done. Okay, so now I've got this giant list of 20, 30 pages of stuff that I've decided I want to do. What do I do first? So number 3 is priorities.
Priorities is important because priorities, kind of what John was saying a second ago, is how do we determine what's more important than what? What fits in where what? You can't achieve your goals if you don't set priorities for things. And I think even beyond just how do you achieve your goals, well, it's not really going beyond your goals, but one of your goals should be, how, we were talking a second ago, how do I improve my life today? How do I improve my mental, physical, or financial health? Well, you have to set priorities so that these goals don't conflict with each other, and so that there is a balance, which we'll come to in a little while. Focusing on the things that will help you achieve your short and long-term goals. Well, and this is very important, being realistic about the need for downtime or the lack thereof, because I think some people do overestimate how much downtime they need, and I think that's right. There's a lot of discussion that's gone on for probably about. Well, I think this is probably a discussion that's an age-old discussion that each generation thinks the generation that comes after them takes too much downtime.
Right. And, we were even talking about it yesterday, which is, one of the things Aaron likes to do to relax a little bit is he'll take 15 minutes. He's not going crazy or anything and spending hours and hours most of the time. And he'll play a video game or two. He'll go play stuff, shoot up some things, and 15 minutes of that relaxes him. To me, that's not necessarily relaxing. On the other hand, I like to go, I know he does too, we'll go to the gun range on a Sunday or something like that, and we'll shoot for an hour. And that hour of shooting allows me to be able to focus for the rest of the week. That's all. If I just get that hour of shooting in a week, I become very calm. It's a very easy way to think for the rest of the day. It clears up my head. So for me, that's a relaxing thing to do. And when I get home, I like to watch a sitcom or two after work. It just lets me take my mind off of all the important things in life and focus on just the stupid. And sometimes you need that just to relax your brain.
Absolutely. I know when I keep a very busy schedule, I was joking around with Jennifer, my girlfriend, the other day, and she was teasing me about doing something. And I showed her my calendar, which starts at about 6 o'clock in the morning. It starts about 6 o'clock in the morning. And then it runs till 6 o'clock in the evening. And it is jam-packed. I break things up in 15-minute increments. So there's so much going on. And then by 6:30, when I walk in the door in the evening, there's a lot of other stuff I could immediately jump into doing with the show, with articles for The Rabbit Hole, with articles for Neil Strauss's website, all kinds of business development things that go on for the show, the really boring crap. But I could dive immediately into that, but I know I wouldn't be able to give my full attention and effort to it if I didn't then take an hour to kind of relax. And with that hour, I'll do one of two things. Either I'll take a 30-minute nap, and then I'll watch 30 minutes of news, or I'll watch some TV show or something that's sitting on the DVR, just taking the time to relax. And that is an important and significant thing that does need to be figured in here. And I think that's something that people have a real tendency, especially when they start to get involved with trying to be very systematic in the way that they become more effective in their lives is that they overdo it and they burn themselves up.
People assume that efficiency means constantly working, and that's not necessarily the case. If you're efficient, you'll get a burst of work done, but then you've actually expended, believe it or not, a lot of energy doing that. That real efficiency takes a good amount of energy to get done. You just got a lot done with the energy you expended. So it's going to require some downtime. And I mean, so that aside, we now know you need to relax. Now let's talk about some other priorities that you set. Well, priorities are a fluid thing, and we went back and forth a lot while we were talking about this show on how we give you a rigid set of categories or tell you how to deal with priorities from a, I was thinking about it from a software development company's point of view. You have P1 priorities and P2, and those stand for priority 1, priority 2. But in personal life, it doesn't really work that way. Your priorities are rather fluid. So what might be important one day may not be as important the next, or may just slip a little bit, or may become much more important. So you have to kind of take a look at that from a personal perspective and on your own. But what you do need to do is, no matter who you are, come up with a structure for yourself that works. And that means taking a look at it and saying, here are my goals. So we talked about your goals before, and we talked about being proactive. Lay out your goals. If it's good for you to write things down, write them down. Write down all the mini goals you have in order to achieve your bigger goal, and then prioritize those. Take a look at each one and say, you know what, in order to get number 3 done, I actually had to get number 5 done. So maybe number 5 needs to move up on the priority list, because if I don't get it done, I'll never get further along in the process. So it's just a mindset of going through everything in a logical format, in almost a process flow. And I mean, I'm not a big process flow kind of person. I like to think a little bit more matrix organization and a little less structured. But even for in my life, I like to write down my goals and really think of them in terms of how do I get from point A to point B, and all the little stops I need to make along the way, and then figuring out which one of those stops needs to come first, second, third, fourth. It's a great way to start thinking about things, and it allows you to start moving closer and closer to your end goal.
Moving past priorities and moving on to the interdependence section of these talking points, which is your interdependence within, now that you've worked through the first 3 and worked on your independence and your effectiveness, then how do we then start to move that into a very important part of the show, which is community, working within groups? Number 4 is win-win, which sounds a little cheesy, but it's what we're really talking about within the context of win-win is that you need to be seeking mutually beneficial relationships. And we've used the bank account analogy in the past. The personal relationship bank account theory is essentially when 2 people are interacting with one another, there is a constant give and take. But where you have relationships that do not work well, whether those are personal, whether those are intimate or family or just associations, if you have a lopsided relationship where one person is taking more than another, well, the person that's taking too much is overdrawing on, we'll call, a relationship bank account. And this is a really great way of kind of wrapping up the concept. It's been a great way for us to wrap up a concept, and we even joke about it within our close inner circle of friends about, like, we have the friend of ours that's the comedian that does the show, the very beginning of the show's introductions, is the one that started it for us as a group. And his joke was that he doesn't show up and hang out enough, and so that he's not paying enough in to the friendship bank account. This applies whether we're talking about personal, whether we're talking about all the different social circles of your life, including work. There has to be a balance, and within survival groups, and as we branch out and try to meet other people that are interested in the topic, which I hope you're doing. I really hope that nobody out there is really trying to be an isolationist. It's almost impossible, especially within the context of our show, which is urban survival.
And we'll get to why it's so critical as we move a little through these. You'll even, as we move through these next 3, including win-win and the ones that follow, you'll get why it is just so critical. life doesn't work well when it's just you. These win-win scenarios, like Aaron was saying, it's across the board. It's in business, it's in life, it's in your relationships. And the reason it's so important is, and this is a great rule of negotiating for anybody who's out there, and negotiation, by the way, is the way in which you live. I don't care who you are or whether you think you're negotiating from day to day. You negotiate with your spouse, you negotiate with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you negotiate with your coworkers, and all of those should be win-win scenarios. And what that means is everybody walks away feeling like they got something for themselves and not just like they lost. So some people like to live in a win-lose world. That doesn't work very well for very long. If you keep winning and everybody else keeps losing, well, eventually people are going to resent you. They aren't going to want to do deals with you or do agreements with you or have relationships with you. So you have to have win-win. It has to be give and take. And in the end, when you walk away from a relationship or a deal, you have to go, you know what, that felt good. And it needs to feel that way on both sides. That's actually a very good way of looking at negotiating in general. If both parties walk away looking like they had a success, then you had a successful negotiation. So how does that play into community? So within a community, you want to make sure you have these win-win relationships also. And that leads us to our next one, which is learning and teaching. And this is very much a win-win type scenario. If you go out and you learn and you become understanding of a topic and you go off and teach that topic, then you've both taken in and given back to your community. It's a community win-win. This takes it kind of to that next level. Everybody wins, and you get to learn more. By being the teacher, you actually get to also be a student in the sense that when people ask you questions and you teach a subject, you actually become more of an expert in that subject.
Yeah, the concepts that you're dealing with become much more cemented and firm in your mind, and you get a much deeper understanding. You're forced to examine those topics at a much different and deeper level than you would have if you're just, once you learn it, you're like, oh, okay, that's enough. You don't then turn around and teach it. A good example of this is Project Appleseed, which we've mentioned many times, and I know a lot of the show listeners are involved in. Project Appleseed is, for those that don't know, it's a historical organization that teaches riflery as kind of a come on to get you involved. It is the best way to learn traditional rifle skills. And so what happens is you come out, you learn to shoot a rifle in a very traditional manner with a sling and with the real skill, and not to be a sniper. It's nothing like that. It's the rifleman kind of, really becoming a truly superb shot.
Responsible marksmanship.
And that is a very significant thing that needs to be addressed, is that it is responsible marksmanship. That is a key aspect of a rifleman or riflewoman. And so you can learn a lot from it, and you can become a very good shot. But you learn so much more if once you've achieved a certain level, you then turn around, accept the orange hat, which is kind of the entrance part to becoming an instructor, and you start learning what it means to teach within the organization, and you learn how to teach. And so within doing that, you start to see within the people that you've turned around and started to help and to teach how to shoot, you're seeing firsthand all the little mistakes that you made. And now while you understood the mistakes before, now you really understand what it means from a secondhand view of what those mistakes were when you were shooting, whether we're talking about flinching or snatching a trigger or blinking while you're taking a shot, any number of the little rats that kind of eat away at your skill. And that applies in everything. And I think even in the very beginning of the show, there's the intro is joking about us teaching fish to fish or something. But, it's the same thing with fishing. It's anything. Once you learn it, if you're then turning around giving it back, you're giving back into that relationship bank account, and the relationship being whatever community you're involved in, by giving back, by teaching something. And you are still getting something out by not only giving something back in and reaffirming your importance and worth within the community that you're in, you're still learning. You're learning a lot more than you would have had you just learned it and then moved on.
Yeah, and tying this a little bit, so we said this right from the beginning. This is not directly lined up. I mean, it's Covey's general process, but we took it and changed it up relatively significantly. But even tying this into a little bit of what Covey talks about for his understand and be understood, which is his number 5, this goes into that same thing. When you go off and you learn about yourself. Okay, if you're not, then you're probably not doing a great job out there learning enough. You need to go do more. But if you are out there really learning and absorbing, you're learning a lot about yourself. And when you understand yourself more, and when you understand your scenario and your situation more and the people around you more, you have a much easier time being understood, which allows you to, again, be within a community, to live within a community. It's so critical to have this learn, teach, or understand and be understood philosophy, because it leads to, yep, you heard it, number 6.
And number 6 is synergy.
And synergy comes from a combination of the win-win, learn, teach, understand, be understood thing. And what it really comes down to is a unit can be much greater than the sum of its parts. In this case, a community of people is actually much greater, much more important, much more powerful than each little individual added up. And an example that I'll use is if you have a baker, a farmer, and a chef, and those 3 people are all on their own, well, it's nice that the baker knows how to bake, and the farmer knows how to farm, and the chef knows how to chef, and each one of those skills is great. But you take them all together, and now you actually have a meal. And that meal is greater than having wheat. That meal is greater than having the knowledge of a baker or the knowledge of a chef. You now have a good meal, and that good meal leads to community. It leads to people interacting. It leads to people being fed.
Leads to people understanding one another.
And people understanding one another. And in order to do that type of synergy, you have to have mutually beneficial relationships. So, everything ties back into each other once you get to synergy. With mutually beneficial relationships, the farmer, the baker, those people, they have a mutual agreement between each other. A fair agreement where they know that they provide each other services, and in the end, they both gain and benefit from those services. That's where you get the idea of synergy. We've become, and one of the reasons our society is as powerful as it is, or any society, if you look at a civilization, it's as powerful as it is because you have a group of people with specialization. I can do a lot of things at once badly, or one thing at a time very well. So if I know how to do one thing very, very well, but I have thousands of people around me who all know how to do the other things, and we can get everything done, but we all are experts in our fields, well, then you can get massive amounts of work done, and you can get it done very effectively. That starts breaking down when we start talking about our survival issues and when we think about the end of the world scenario. So my personal belief, and I know Aaron shares this belief, is that you should have a very broad knowledge base, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be an expert in something. But you should be I'm going to use Renaissance man, you can also be a Renaissance woman, but that broad knowledge base and understanding of a lot of things, having that thirst for knowledge in all kinds of areas. But I am not discounting at all the need to be a specialized person to some extent and know something very well. If you're a baker, be the best baker you can be, because you will be able to contribute to an overall society. If you're a chef, be a damn good chef. That doesn't mean the baker shouldn't know a little bit about wheat and the chef shouldn't know a little bit about maybe how to raise rabbits, but but it does mean that those specialties are not a bad thing. And when you bring them all together, you get a synergy that can truly create greatness. And when you add that to the things we talked about before, win-win, priorities, setting goals, all of that becomes critical to driving an effective community.
And with that, we move on to the 7th and final piece to all of this that
keeps you sane.
Yes, the final piece that keeps you sane.
I think this is where we kind of go from the community back to the individual.
Well, it's back to the individual, and how do you keep both moving parts being the individual and the community, well-oiled and functioning.
Good way of putting it.
And it's balance. And balance touches on every single one and goes into every single one of the other 6 parts to this. So there's balance in goals. You need to have a balance within your goals for your community and your interpersonal relationships, a balance in your health. And from Survival Chi, we know that health, within the context of our show, breaks down into your physical, mental, and financial health. And then there are goals to be achieved and time to be balanced out for intelligence. And intelligence breaks down to skills and general knowledge and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So there is a balance. And even going beyond those basics, we have that maybe you need balance in your spiritual life. And we don't necessarily mean that as any one particular religious view, but it's however you define spirituality for yourself.
Things that make you feel better about day-to-day life and let you look at the world in a more positive way.
Exactly. And balance is so important. And I think all of us can probably imagine and identify at least a time in our lives where things were unbalanced. Maybe we spent, I know maybe as a teenage boy, I spent too much time focusing on women. Or,
right. Or at the beginning of our careers, I think we all went through a point where we spent too much time focusing on work. And then one day you heard that concept of work-life balance and you said, ooh, what's that?
Yeah, that sounds exciting.
Right. And so it's all about those types of balances. And it's in every aspect of your life. And it even goes down to, we talked about priorities. You need to balance your priorities.
You need to balance your community win-win relationships and balance.
Well, and actually, let's just say something there. One of the things that Covey talks about in win-win in those mutually beneficial relationships, and this is something I do happen to like. I don't disagree. I don't agree with everything Covey says. I don't disagree with everything he says either. I think there's a lot to take out of what he has in his book, and there's a reason it's so popular. It's effective. Within the win-win scenario, one of the things I really like to take away from it is the balance in relationships that he has there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that he actually says there are a lot of times when you see a win-lose scenario and you might walk away the winner, but somebody else is going to walk away the loser. You may actually want to walk away from the deal. It may not be a good deal. And I think that's something a lot of us should consider. There's a lot of times when you might see a deal where you look at it and you go, wow, I really walk away just taking that guy. Well, I don't know. You might want to consider that. And that's from both an emotional health point of view, a mental status point of view, and a good community citizen point of view. Think about that deal before you take that and make sure that you're taking the right deal.
Yeah, more often than not, you're probably not.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I tend to agree with Covey on, which is that a win-lose scenario is a deal worth walking away from more often than not.
Mm-hmm. And we can also have a balance within learning and teaching. If you spend all of your time focusing purely on your own development in learning skills or whatever it is you're trying to learn, then you're not balancing out taking time to teach.
Well, and I don't think you'll ever become an expert that way. I don't think you can truly be.
You can't.
When people go for their PhDs in subjects, they're often required to teach courses. They're often required to at least be teaching assistants for the professors.
Yeah, I don't even know that it's often. I think that actually is a pure
it may
requirement of a PhD
It may very well be, and we could be wrong or right on this, but if it's not, it should be. And but I think it is, and I think, Aaron, you're right, that it's almost always a requirement, if not always. But there's a reason for that. It's because by teaching a subject, you learn so much more. You learn things you never would have learned before because you wouldn't have had to.
Yeah. And something, I think the final piece to this that is so hard for so many people
we haven't introduced it before, but we're going to talk a lot more about it going forward.
Yeah, which is saying no. And when I say no, at least for me, I immediately think of saying no to people, but that can also be saying no to tasks.
It could be saying no to yourself.
Yes.
So there are times when you're going to want to do something because I'm going to use Aaron as an example because we were talking about this earlier.
Was
Aaron,
this about birthday cake?
No, that is a time we probably should have both said no. But sometimes it's about getting into too much detail, even where you want to just dig in all out. And it's sometimes you just have to say, you know what, I'm going to take this one bite at a time. Let me take the top level, and then I'll worry about the next level and the next one. So you have to say no to yourself. Sometimes you are just so excited about a topic, not speaking to Aaron directly, but any of us. Me too. Sometimes I will get so excited about a topic that I truly become detrimental to myself.
Well, we actually do that to the show all the time, and we do have to spend usually a couple hours before each show really going through and trimming things out of the show, because what we realize is if we put everything we want to put into a single show, the show would be like 2 or 3 hours long.
And we'd lose our voices and our spouses / girlfriends. It wouldn't be pretty.
And there might be heat strokes since we do have to record the show with the AC turned off.
Exactly. So it's not just about saying no to external tasks and people. Sometimes it's about saying no to yourself or just a concept. You may say, look, I don't have time for that right now. And it's not you being rude. It's just about that priorities discussion we had before, or setting the goals, where if something doesn't fit into my goals, that doesn't necessarily mean I can't do it, because there are times to just be a good citizen or a good member of the community, which, by the way, should be part of your goals. But there are times when you can say, look, I just can't do that right now. Is there some way we can get back together again in a few weeks and discuss it again? Because saying no is critical, and if you don't say no, you'll never get anything done.
And a final piece we're going to kind of slip in here, which is something that we did an entire show on recently, which is about personal responsibility. And that really is what this whole show was about.
Right.
Was about taking the personal responsibility to improve things.
Right. And we took, by the way, listener feedback on that, which was that a lot of, some of you said the last show turned out to be a little bit more like us talking at you. Mm-hmm. And, I don't disagree. We really did want to get it across very clearly, but we didn't really give you a framework to think about that personal responsibility. So here we are now trying to give you more of a framework of how to actually take that responsibility back.
Exactly. It's not when we speak to personal responsibility within the framework of these 7 habits, it's not that you're not being personally responsible. It's, hey, here are 7 things we, ourselves included in this conversation, can all do to take more personal responsibility than we already are.
Right. And to be clear, no one, and I mean no one, is going to do this for you.
Yes, and that is a very key point of taking personal responsibility.
And it's all a choice. You need to sit there and say, you know what, do I want to do? The first step to all of this, and we started with our very first thing in there, which was setting goals, I believe, or actually it's being proactive. Well, the first proactive thing to do is to make the decision that you are going to be more effective. And once you do that, then the rest of this falls into place.
We hope you're enjoying your Labor Day weekend, and with that, we wrap up episode 33. Thank you for joining us. Help support In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival podcast and blog. We're now accepting applications for show sponsors. For more information, please use the contact form on the site and choose option Advertise. If you like the podcast, make sure to leave us a review in iTunes. It helps others find us. If you didn't, well, why not tell us about it using the contact form on the site? Seriously, the show is for you, the listener. Be sure to connect with us through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the Urban Survival Forum through the links on the top right-hand side of the site at www.intherabbithole.com and on the forum, forum.intherabbithole.com. Also, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. By connecting with us, you receive updates about the site and notifications of new articles and podcast episodes. That's right, we're not just a podcast. Every week, articles are posted to the site intherabbithole.com that cover all manner of topics relating to surviving in an urban environment, whether in good times or in extreme circumstances. Show notes are posted with each episode where we invite you to comment on the show and interact with us. From Houston, Texas. Till next time, stay safe and sound.